passion can actually kill a business, because if you're so blinded by what you think is the right way and you're not willing to listen to outside guidance and advice, then it could kill the business.
Venture Out Loud, where we have candid conversations on running a venture capital firm, as well as investing in founders, planning for profits around a purpose, and making a positive impact through entrepreneurship. I want to welcome everyone today. I have my partners and colleagues, Ryan Retcher and Darshan Vyas, with me. My name is Navin Goyal, co-founder and CEO of LOUD Capital. Today, we will be talking about startups, what we look at in startups. Usually it's people, and what do people do within the startup community? What do people do for other people? What do people do for us as an organization? Why do people matter? And so today we're just going to kick off. And by the way, I was told by my colleague and good friend, Ryan Retcher, who's sitting right across from me, to ensure that I'm clear, I talk simply, and I do not use foul language, so we can ensure that kids, including our own, can listen. And I actually love that, because in the end, when we talk, when we invest, when we teach, we're always keeping kids in mind. They are our future leaders, doctors, stakeholders, investors, and of course, they will be here longer than we are. So we do care. And if I do cuss, I'm going to get a bad look from everyone in the room, and I'm going to look like a person who doesn't care about kids. So I'm going to do my best to speak clearly, simply, and not use foul language. On that note, let's talk about startups. Let's talk about why we invest in startups. Why are startups so exciting, first of all? Let's ask that question. Why are startups exciting? If you say startup to a bunch of kids or adults, a lot of smiles come, a lot of energy comes to the table. People almost want to talk and say something. Why is that?
I think for startups, why it's so interesting and why people are so mesmerized by startups is the potential of the opportunity, potential of the entrepreneur, just like senior kids. When we talk about our portfolio companies, we refer to them as our own kids. It's like when you see a company exit or hit certain milestones, that's kind of a milestone that your kid's going through. So, just like your kids, you raise them, you nurture them, you feed them, you give them the resources to thrive. It's the same thing as startups, in my opinion.
What about you, Ryan? Why do you think startups make people glow?
Honestly, I think that it's the amount of creativity that people realize that it takes to build something from scratch. It doesn't matter what it is. I think our world is starving for creativity. I think creativity is required as a skill these days. It's not something that's taught to us. And so when we see an opportunity to be creative, even though I don't think people actually think of it that way, that's what it really is. It's building something and being able to use those, I think, God-given creative juices that we all have at some level, in some way, shape, or form, to make something.
I totally agree. And initially, when I got into the startup world, which was back in 2014, I started really seeing it clearly that it is the output of creativity. It's a celebration of creativity. Traditionally in school, creative is for art class. The rest is following formulas, following a lesson. Make sure you do this to solve this problem. Here's a couple tools. When it comes to startups, when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's about do what you need to. Use any skill that you have right now, any skill that you can learn. Utilize people around you to go in this direction. No one's going to judge you because it's yours. And so startup is like the new dream. And, whether you're a kid or a young adult or had a couple careers under your belt, it's really this going back to there's a piece of clay in the middle of this table and make what you want. And now you can say, this could actually be my career. which makes it more exciting. I'm a kid and someone says, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, that's a stressful question. A startup could be your creative outlet and it could be your career. And to me, that's very exciting. And so when we're talking about startups, so we're energized, we're excited, people are glowing, we all love it. That's why we're here at the table. Hopefully people listening right now also are glowing hearing about startups. Let's talk about people behind startups. We have invested collaboratively into over 50 some startups at the moment. It's 2021 and we foresee that growing a lot. What are some of the attributes or traits in people that we have invested in that have really resonated with you, excited you, energized you, even caused you to go home and talk about these people?
Yeah, for me, honestly, I'll loop it back around. I think it's the creativity and the passion around the art. Seth Godin talks a lot about the work that people do being their form of art. And I think the common thread that I see in the most successful entrepreneurs that we've invested in and that I've been around is that they truly look at what they're building as a form of art that they're putting out into the world. And it could have nothing to do with art. It could have nothing to do with something that society deems as being creative or artsy, but it is literally their art. And they are so passionate about it and making it great. And there's no one else that can have that passion when they're talking about their company until they create that piece of art and other people see it like, that's great art. That's amazing. I want to be a part of that. I want to be included in that. And so it's an individual that views that their work, their creation as an art form that attracts other people that sees it that way and wants to be involved. And so you have that snowball effect of, okay, you start off and you're working hard, you're creating, other people see it, you attract other great people that see it as art and want to grow it as well. And then you have strong outcomes.
Okay. And so let's just make sure that we understand this, because what if someone's listening to this and they say, this is boring, I'm going to turn this podcast off. I want to make sure they leave with knowing exactly what passion can and can't do. So Darshan, give me an example of someone who is so passionate, giving so much energy around that you just feel happy. You feel like you just had an amazing meal, a glass of wine, and you're on top of the world. What more do you need than passion? Or is passion enough?
No, I mean, there needs to be a combination of passion and logic and strategy. Just because you're passionate doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Passion can actually kill a business, because if you're so blinded by what you think is the right way and you're not willing to listen to outside guidance and advice, then it could kill the business. But at the same time, we've seen entrepreneurs who are so passionate that they fail to they refuse to let the business fail. And and actually our logo kind of signifies the entrepreneurial death valley. People are passionate at first, and they're excited when the a business first starts, and then then everyone starts struggling, and they start losing teammates, and then it's the last person who's really passionate that just keeps moving forward. And then that's when things pop, and then it's an upward trend. So the people who keep pushing, we like that passion, but we don't want you to be blinded by not taking outside advice either.
Yeah. So if you look at our Loud Capital logo, it looks like, bars of an equalizer, like loud music. But it's really mimicking the Valley of Death curve. And if you look that up on Investopedia or some other resource, you'll actually read about the journey of entrepreneurship. It's not easy, but a persistence is needed to go alongside your passion to keep you through, or I should say, kick through various obstacles. But okay, you mentioned something, Darshan, that we're around the table and someone's exuding passion and you need other characteristics. Give me an example, Ryan, of someone who was in the room pitching their startup and they had all this passion, But how do you determine those other traits that Darshan was just talking about? Strategy, persistence, or resilience, being able to learn from other people, maybe humility is what we're going towards. Tell me, how do I dissect that? Because a lot of us have met passionate people, but what are some signs I or we or anyone listening should look at while we're in this discussion?
Yeah, I don't mean to keep waxing poetic, but I really see it as there's a clear trait of their ability to understand why they are in it and what the outcomes they are seeking. So when you start to ask them questions like, why are you building this? Why are you, what do you hope to see from this? What are the outcomes you see for this company, for yourself? And oftentimes the way they answer those questions can provide tells. You never know for sure. And we've had good instincts and bad instincts that were proven wrong on people. And that's frankly the challenge of just really investing in general in early stage companies, because there's limited information. You do your due diligence, you dot your I's and cross your T's, you look at all of the business model and the financials. But at the end of the day, especially the way we make decisions, make investment decisions, and choose founders that we're going to believe in and invest in, it ultimately comes down to this gut feeling that we have based on our conversations, based on our interactions. How do they handle those questions that are tough? How do they respond? Do they get offended really easily and quickly? Do they, if you offer a simple suggestion, do they take feedback? Whether it's a good suggestion or a bad suggestion, do they take the feedback and listen, or do they respond aggressively to you? No. It's a lot of those things where you really get to kind of see the person come out, the real person come out beyond that passion, beyond their creativity. And ultimately it comes down to that why, but their behaviors and how they respond to certain asks and tensions throughout the process, I think starts to show who they are, how they'll react when they start to hit that valley and things start to get tough, as they always do. They always do. That's the point that makes or breaks the startup and that journey of the founder, is how they are able to react to it. And I think it really just comes down to that gut feeling ultimately and how they respond to those interactions.
And foundationally, I would say entrepreneurship is exciting to me personally, because when you are climbing the mountain, we all want to get to the top of the mountain, but there are different ways to do it. There's different ways to climb. There's different speeds. There's different angles of the mountain that you would take that some other people are so confident in. And one of the traits that I would say, probably going along what you said, Ryan, was being able to entertain that there are different ways to go up the mountain. And I think us three in this room right now have experienced the ones who are so passionate and so committed to the 1 out of the 10 different pathways to go up the mountain that they will not even entertain the other 9. And to us, that is a flag, because it's really lacking the open-mindedness, the risk that this one pathway may not work out and what happens then. Or perhaps I am so confident in this one pathway that by looking at the 9 others, this gives me even better ideas to go down this pathway successfully. So it's really about acknowledging what you know, what you don't know, and respecting other people's experiences and backgrounds to contribute to you getting up the mountain. And I think that's what we look for in startups. And would you say we look for that in general in people when we hire people, when we bring people in the organization? There's obviously a lot of people who want to get into venture capital, a lot of people who want to be part of a startup, a lot of people who want to become an investor and invest in startups or VC funds, etc. So would you say that trait or those traits carry over to people in our organization?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one thing that we've really learned over time, is that to be able to recognize those traits in entrepreneurs, we have to have people on our team that have those traits themselves. I think as founding members, you and Darshan exhibit, in different ways, those things. As you brought people like Nishad and I and others onto the team, you just naturally gravitated towards people that not only thought, similarly to you, but saw the world and saw people the same way as you. And I think that's been part of our success, but we're able to collectively look at an entrepreneur that we're evaluating for investment through that lens of who we are, how we approach things, how we have been successful and have failed at things, and how we've observed success and failure in those things. And we are very open collectively, I believe, at identifying that. So we've been able to bring on members of the team that are able to recognize those things too. So the pressure is less on a few of us to identify things, and that's spread more to a larger team that gives us more eyes on a person, on an opportunity to ensure we have an appropriate lens on it.
And so there's a lot more talk about emotional intelligence. And so, Darshan, and just to remind you, we have young listeners and more experienced listeners on this. So, how do you describe, even to me, what emotional intelligence is? And some people call it EQ. You hear emotional intelligence, and then there's subsectors of humility and empathy, which we can also get into. But tell me about emotional intelligence.
My understanding of emotional intelligence is, obviously there's the IQ, how you look at things quantitatively, how you do math problems and, things like that. But my definition of emotional intelligence is how well do you react to situations? How well do you adapt to change? And what is your response and feedback? And so we encounter different entrepreneurs all the time. Certain entrepreneurs, as Ryan mentioned, they get very aggressive if you give them constructive criticism and things like that. And I don't think that's ideal entrepreneur that we typically look for. The ones that we look for are able to take in that constructive criticism. If they disagree with us, they disagree with us, but at least we can have an intelligent conversation about why they think differently and things like that. And so that's my, I guess, opinion of emotional intelligence is how well you handle situations. And I think that emotional intelligence is one of the key factors in successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I've really embraced emotional intelligence because I think I have a higher emotional intelligence than book intelligence, IQ. And so when I think about school, when I was in elementary school, and for those listeners out there, that was a long time ago, we talked about getting great scores on our tests. So studying hard, taking the test, turning it in the classroom, and let's say going to recess or lunch. Now, how I look at the world and the value of the world, and I would think a lot of you would agree with this, is it's taking that test, but how important is it how you are outside at recess interacting with the other kids, sitting at the lunch table, opening up your lunch or buying your lunch and interacting with the people at that table. No one ever told me, hey, make sure you're talking with other people, asking how they're doing, being a good listener, talking about conversations that are engaging. If you see someone who's looking like they're not themselves, ask them. These are things we maybe talk more about right now, which is more the EQ, social skills, being good with other people, right? People skills. Growing up, it was just about the test scores. It was about your grades. And so for those listening, emotional intelligence are anything that has to do with other people. It's listening to them. It's when you're talking to them, assuring you get their attention, speaking simply, making sure you're understood, not talking above them, not talking about yourself only, caring about other people. It's all these other skills that I feel grade school wasn't really pushing to learn, but now we're more, conscious of it. And here we are as employers, as investors, as business builders, looking for these skills that we're not spoken about. So to me, it's really interesting. And for those kids out there that are listening, it doesn't have to be kids, could be adults. That is a crucial component of the real world that we look for, that employers really embrace. and that I feel is a greater prediction of success than the test scores that I got.
I agree. There's lots of case studies of, you hear the super entrepreneur who quit Harvard and, started a big company. And, it's funny when you talk about test scores, because I had decent grades, in high school. And I remember taking the ACTs, and I probably scored the lowest out of any of my friends, and even people who I thought I would score higher than. But I felt horrible for that, and and it made me question: am I going to be successful? Am I going to get a good job, and all that stuff? And then we go to college, and most classes I did well. Some classes I did very poorly, and same thing. It's just one of those things that's grades and quantitative information doesn't really assess who you are as a person and your success in the future. And that's something I want to let the listeners know is the emotional intelligence is far more important than the IQ. Don't get me wrong, it does become helpful. If you are smart, you can solve problems and things like that. But if you can't handle certain situations and you break down and things like that, you just need that emotional intelligence to kind of get you through.
Darshan, you said a word earlier that I think epitomizes everything that we're talking about, and that word is empathy. And empathy is the heart of innovation. You can't innovate something new that's better if you don't have empathy for the problem and the people that are experiencing a problem that you're trying to solve. So ultimately, the entrepreneurs that we invest in, if you were to boil them down to one word, they're empathetic. Now, obviously, you want them to have certain skills, experiences, expertise, etc. But if they don't have empathy and they're really thinking about outcomes for themselves, that really comes out. And so from an investing standpoint, you want to see empathy. From a hiring standpoint, I think this goes really for any employer, because you can have the best resume in the world. You can have a 4.2 magna cum laude, Harvard education, and worked at the biggest investment banks in the world, or have this amazing resume. But if you lack empathy, you're going to lack success in this world. And I oftentimes have heard in pitches, when we ask, where do you see yourselves in 5 years? And it's like the most cliche interview question ever, but there's a reason why you ask it. It goes to the heart of what people are thinking. Are they self-centered, or are they empathetic and centered around others? If they say, well, I'm going to do this and that, and I'm going to be sipping Mai Tais, on the beaches of Cabo, they're more than likely to be sipping Mai Tais at the local Applebee's happy hour. I think that it's hard to find success in this world when you're thinking about yourself and not able to put yourself in other people's shoes.
And I'm going to wrap this up basically, with the IQ and the accomplishments and the resume that you just talked about, Ryan, where the example that I said with the 10 different ways to climb the mountain. What I didn't say is once you get to the top of the mountain, if you get there, there's still a lot of work ahead. There's actually still miles of mountains to go across, and then you got to get down. And so when I talk about IQ, test scores, accomplishments in the past, it's basically you just got to the top of the mountain. What are you going to do now? You're at the top of the mountain. Okay, clap, great accomplishment. Take a swig of water, take a deep breath, but now you have miles ahead of you. And so how are you going to use other people around you to continue the journey? How are you going to ask for help? How are you going to solve for more water that you'll need a couple miles down the road? And so the opportunity is in front of you. It's not what brought you here. It's how you can manage to continue moving forward. And that's where I think we're talking about EQ, humility, social skills in general. And so for those of you out there, we have been thinking about this subject for a long time. I'm really grateful to be able to talk about it today with Ryan and Darshan. but just continue thinking about how we can continue to learn skills to be better with people around us, to help be better to people, and then to learn from our kids even, because they teach us a lot. And I hope there's some kids listening out there, including Ryan's kids. I hope I've been clean, simple, and not using foul language. And I want to thank all the listeners out there for joining us for this great episode of Venture Out Loud. Thank you very much.